lead author and University of Otago Wellington bioethics researcher Dr. Cindy Towns, who has been campaigning for a practice to be introduced to New Zealand, which is common throughout the United Kingdom, and I would have thought should have been common here, and that is that you have gender-based hospital rooms. When you can, you put the men together in one and the woman in the other. But apparently there isn't. The reasons why she argues that's important, well, we're about to discuss now, and she joins us. Dr. Cindy Towns, lovely to have you on. Welcome to the show.
Kia ora, Michael. Thanks for having me on. If I can just start by saying I'm really sorry to hear about the experience of Lucy. She should never have been put in that position, neither should the gentleman in that room, and I really hope she articulates herself in writing either to the hospital or the Health and Disability Commissioner. It just shouldn't happen.
Sorry, shouldn't it? I thought it's now standard practice that they just mix the genders, and that's what you're concerned about.
Yes, that is what I'm concerned about. It shouldn't happen. It doesn't have to happen. It's an issue of basic security, particularly for women, but also it's a violation of the rights, basic rights of all of our patients.
Yes, because I was actually thinking about it from a male point of view. I was thinking if I was that 70-year-old incontinent man who was, at the end of his tether on a relatively regular basis, I don't think I'd like a 19-year-old girl opposite me either.
No.
The privacy aspect is, well, I would have thought quite important.
Oh, absolutely, Michael. They in the survey data to back you up. So, particularly in the UK where it's banned, and in Australia, it's not just the women. The women feel threatened, understandably. So there's issues there for their sexual and psychological safety around that. But the men don't like it either. They feel it's very undignified. I know of an elderly gentleman with a colleague in Australia who's advocating for the same things. He would ask the woman next to him, excuse me for bringing this up with your audience, but to please walk down the corridor so that he could pass wind. These are people coming to the hospital where they're performing very intimate, basic bodily functions separated by strangers, from strangers by simply a curtain. It's just not on.
Yeah, no, and that's the other issue, isn't it? That the privacy aspect is given to you by this curtain, this threadbare curtain that separates you from the next person. That's right. No, it's okay now. You can't possibly see that. Everything's gone. Now, the other thing that you're saying though is that your research suggests that the risk of rights violations and subsequent harm is actually exacerbated by the high rates of physical, cognitive and sensory impairment experienced by people in hospital wards. In other words, they're likely to do something that they wouldn't normally do because they're in a hospital ward. Is that right?
Absolutely. So if we look at our rates of delirium, which is basically confusion, where you're not yourself because of an underlying medical condition and a vulnerable brain, which goes with an ageing population, that's about 23%. It's probably more in some of our older adult wards. And then if you've got dementia your rates of dementia underlying that, you could well be looking at the majority of your patients, not being themselves or being at risk of getting lost or wandering around or not being able to cover themselves appropriately or being aware of privacy violations. The inpatient characteristics definitely exacerbate the harm, and I think that's not realised, and a lot of the things that I'm talking about in our papers with risk of agitation, violence, sexual harm, most of the men I'm talking about, they're not criminal, they don't have a forensic history, they're very unwell, and they should never be put in that position. And I imagine the gentleman opposite your daughter, he would have been absolutely humiliated by being in that position, absolutely mortified, because that's the experience that we hear about and that we see in the survey data.
This show goes out live, Cindy, but obviously it goes as podcasts and onto servers as well. But one of the things that I get are people who text me in live time while I'm talking to you. And as I've just talked to you, Bridget has just texted me and she says, Michael, I'm a nurse and 10 years ago, it was normal to have female and male rooms. We never mixed genders. This is 10 years ago.
No, they didn't. They didn't. It's something that's eroded over time, and I think there'll be a number of reasons for that. But I think the really important thing here, Michael, is that we can fix this, and it doesn't cost anything. So if we look at, I've been advocating for this for many years, and so we've written 2 papers. One that shows that the prevalence is high, increasing and disproportionately affects older people. That was the first paper. The second paper is the rights-based paper, which you were talking about, which got a lot of media attention and is a huge public outcry. But look, what we've actually done at Wellington Hospital, we've got one of the busiest, worst-designed wards in the hospital, and yet our wonderful medical nurses have had a single-gender bedding policy in place since 2020. And so their adherence to single-gender bedding has gone from around 50% to over 90% with absolutely no money required. This is just good policy, good nursing handover. I'm the clinical ethics advisor for the region. I've done lots of education sessions. I actually did one yesterday. And they've changed their culture, changed their practice. They're using a policy that works. Now, we're not going to get to 100% until we design our hospital properly and get single occupancy rooms and some more beds. We're not going to get to 100%, but what we can do is a huge amount of mitigation to sort this out. And so it's disappointing that we're the Prime Minister and the Minister of Health, our common sense government, on the campaign trail last year going, yes, we agree with this. Now, this is something that literally costs nothing, and yet is still not in place. Just do it. That's like
it's an issue. Well, it's an issue I intend to pursue with Shane Retty the next time I talk to him on the show, because you're right.
Please do.
I can't see it. You're right. And how did it happen, though? I mean, for those of us who've been to hospital, this is over 10 years ago, if we didn't have our own room, we shared it with another male, or, there were 4 of us and we all, there were 4 males. Yes. How did it get to be the stage that hospital managers decided that mixing genders in a ward was a good idea?
So look, I think this is something we can talk about, basic patient safety and rights in general, what's gone wrong. I think we've got issues with our design, our policy and our culture. Now look, if you look at design, we just don't have enough beds, and that puts a huge amount of pressure on everyone. We don't have enough beds, and we've got less than 30% single occupancy rooms, which is just bloody bizarre if your audience doesn't mind me saying so. We need them for infectious disease. We've just been through a pandemic, delirium, dementia, and dying. So our design is very poor. But then if you look at our policies aren't right either, because they don't incorporate basic patient safety and rights. And you might be able to say, oh, come on, guys, when we put in that 6-hour target, we thought you'd have some common sense and think about patient rights and safety. But I think that it hasn't happened, and we don't have a specific policy around this like they do in the NHS. So you've got design, policy, and then you've got culture. And I think leadership and education comes around culture. And I think you're right, Michael. I think we need to look at our bedding managers and our nurses and go, hey, what's wrong with your education or your culture that you're no longer thinking about this? But the good thing that we've shown is that actually we can change it. We can change it. It doesn't cost you anything in terms of delays from ED or money. So we can fix this. But I think we need to look at those 3 things. But most importantly, let's get a national policy in place, because Wellington medical nurses have shown you can do this without delays and without cost.
Okay, so if Wellington can do it, and Auckland obviously isn't, how common is this bedding policy around the rest of the country?